The flashlight beam cut through the darkness like a blade, illuminating Evan Harper's face as he unzipped his tent at 2 a.m. "Hands up! Step out now!" the deputy commanded, while HOA President Lydia Warrick stood behind him, smirking as she waved fraudulent documents claiming ownership of the lake Evan's grandfather had bought 60 years ago. She had no idea she'd just triggered a war that would end with her in federal prison. "Follow my story to the end and comment which city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has gone." The fire had burned down to glowing embers when Evan Harper heard the engines. He'd been lying in his tent listening to the familiar symphony of crickets and the gentle lapping of water against the shore when the mechanical growl shattered the peace. Headlights swept across the canvas walls like searchlights in a prison yard. Evan sat up, his heart already racing. Through the thin fabric, he could see multiple vehicles pulling up to his campsite. Doors slammed, voices carried across the water. "This is it," a woman's voice said, sharp and satisfied. "Right where I said he'd be." Evan recognized that voice. Lydia Warrick, president of the Pine Hollow Homeowners Association. The woman who'd been leaving passive-aggressive notes about his grass height and mailbox position for the past year. "Sir, I need you to step out of the tent with your hands visible." The new voice was official, commanding, law enforcement. Evan's hands trembled as he reached for the zipper. This had to be some kind of mistake. The zipper seemed impossibly loud in the silence that had fallen over his lake. His grandfather's lake. The lake that had been in the Harper family since 1964. Deputy Luke Carver stood 10 feet away, flashlight-raised hand resting on his service weapon. The badge on his chest caught the moonlight. Behind him, Evan counted 5 figures. Lydia Warrick stood at the center, clutching a manila folder like a weapon. Her silver hair was pulled back in a bun so tight it seemed to stretch her face into a permanent expression of disapproval. She wore her navy blue power suit even at 2 in the morning, as if she'd been waiting for this moment. Flanking her were other HOA board members. Nate Powell, the new resident who'd moved in last year and immediately started complaining about everyone's property choices. Clara Hayes, looking uncomfortable but present nonetheless. 2 others whose names Evan didn't know, all wearing matching HOA pins on their collars. "What's going on?" Evan asked, keeping his voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. "We've received a report of trespassing on community property," Deputy Carver said. His tone carried a weariness that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. "I'm going to need to see some identification." Evan moved slowly, reaching for his wallet. His hand shook slightly as he pulled out his driver's license. "This is my property. My grandfather bought this land in 1964. I have all the documentation." "Your alleged ownership papers are irrelevant to our community guidelines." "Mr. Harford," Lydia said, deliberately mispronouncing his name. She stepped forward, her heels sinking slightly into the soft earth near the shore. "This lake has been designated as community property, according to documents filed by Harold Vance, our former treasurer." "Harold Vance," Clara Hayes muttered from behind Lydia. "Didn't he leave town 5 years ago after that scandal with the—" Lydia's head snapped toward Clara with the speed of a striking snake. The look she gave could have frozen water in July. Clara fell silent immediately. "The HOA has been organizing community events at this lake for months," Lydia continued, turning back to Evan. "We've established clear precedent for community use. Your camping here without association approval constitutes trespassing." Evan felt his jaw drop. "You've been organizing events on my property. Charging fees. Community property." Lydia corrected her lips, curving into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And yes, the fees go toward maintaining our shared spaces. It's all perfectly legal and documented." She opened her folder with a theatrical flourish, revealing pages of typed documents with official-looking headers. In the harsh beam of the deputy's flashlight, Evan could see HOA letterhead signatures, dates. But something felt wrong about them, like looking at a painting where the perspective was slightly off. "Look, just work it out with the HOA, okay?" Deputy Carver said, shifting his weight uncomfortably. "No need for this to escalate." Evan noticed how the deputy wouldn't meet his eyes, how his gaze kept darting toward his patrol car as if planning an escape route. "There's nothing to work out," Evan said, his voice rising slightly. "This is my land. My grandfather turned down 3 offers from developers to keep it in the family. He taught me to fish right here at this exact spot." "How touching," Lydia said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "But nostalgia doesn't override legal documents. Deputy, I believe Mr. Harford needs to vacate the premises immediately." Nate Powell stepped forward, puffing out his chest. "Yeah, we don't need troublemakers in our community. This is a family neighborhood." "I've lived here longer than you have," Evan shot back. "Not at the lake you haven't," Nate countered. "I've been to every community event here for the past year. Never seen you once." "Because I was working 60-hour weeks at the logistics warehouse to keep up with the mortgage on the ranch house," Evan said. "The house my grandfather built with his own hands." "Excuses," Lydia said dismissively. She turned to Deputy Carver. "Are you going to enforce the law or not?" The deputy sighed heavily. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to pack up your tent and leave. You can sort this out during business hours." Evan looked around at the faces watching him. Some of the board members were recording on their phones. Others looked away, seemingly embarrassed by the spectacle. Clara Hayes appeared to be trying to shrink into herself, her discomfort palpable, even in the darkness. As Evan began breaking down his tent, his movements sharp with suppressed anger, he noticed something that made his blood run even colder. Near what he knew was his property line, someone had planted an HOA sign. "Pine Hollow Community Lake," it read. "Private property of the Homeowners Association." The sign was positioned just wrong enough to be suspicious, as if someone had deliberately moved it to encompass more land than it should. The metal post looked fresh, the dirt around it recently disturbed. "How long has that sign been there?" Evan asked, pointing. "Long enough?" Lydia replied cryptically. As Evan folded his tent, Deputy Carver moved closer, speaking in a low voice that the others couldn't hear. "Don't push too hard on this, okay? Just be smart about it." There was something in his tone, a warning that went beyond professional advice. Evan looked at him sharply, but the deputy had already turned away, heading back toward his patrol car. Lydia watched Evan load his gear into his truck with the satisfaction of a cat that had caught a particularly elusive mouse. "Mr. Harford," she called out as he closed the tailgate, "in the future, please submit any requests to use community property through the proper channels. The forms are available at the HOA office." "It's Harper," Evan said through gritted teeth. "My name is Harper." "Of course it is," Lydia said, her smile never wavering. The drive back to the ranch house took only 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. Evan's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. The headlights illuminated the familiar turns of the road, but everything felt different now, tainted by the night's events. The ranch house sat dark against the star-filled sky, a 2-story craftsman that his grandfather had built in 1968 after saving for 20 years. Evan had grown up here, spent every summer running through the fields, learning to ride horses in the barn, fishing at the lake that was now apparently community property. He didn't go inside. Instead, he headed straight for the barn, flicking on the single bulb that illuminated the space. Dust motes danced in the yellow light as he climbed the ladder to the loft where his grandfather had kept all his important papers. The boxes were exactly where he'd left them after his grandfather's funeral 2 years ago. Evan hadn't been able to bring himself to go through them properly, the grief still too raw. Now anger gave him the strength he'd been lacking. The first box contained photographs. His grandfather as a young man standing proudly next to the sold sign on the property. Another of him teaching a 5-year-old Evan to bait a hook. Dozens more chronicling 60 years of family history on this land. The second box held the documents. Evan's hands trembled slightly as he pulled out the original deed dated June 15, 1964. The survey map was there too clearly, showing the lake within the property boundaries. Every tax record, every assessment, every piece of paper that proved beyond doubt that this land belonged to the Harper family. But then he found something else. A letter dated 5 years ago on HOA letterhead. It was addressed to his grandfather, signed by Lydia Warwick herself. "Dear Mr. Harper," it read, "the Pine Hollow Homeowners Association respectfully requests that you consider donating the lake portion of your property to the community for everyone's benefit. This generous act would provide recreational opportunities for all residents while ensuring the preservation of this natural resource for future generations." Stapled behind it was his grandfather's response, written in his careful handwriting. "Miss Warwick, I must respectfully decline your request. The lake has been in my family for over 50 years and will remain so. It is not for sale, donation, or community use. Please respect my property rights as I respect yours. Sincerely, William Harper. Evan stared at the letters, understanding dawning. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't about some mysterious documents from Harold Vance. This was a calculated move by Lydia Warwick to take what his grandfather had refused to give. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, check your barn tomorrow morning. LWW. Evan's blood ran cold. He grabbed a flashlight and ran outside. Nothing seemed disturbed at first glance, but as he swept the beam across the ground, he saw fresh tire tracks leading toward the lake. He followed them, his heart pounding. The tracks led to a spot where someone had built a large bonfire. The flames were already dying down, but he could see the remnants of wooden posts in the ashes. His fence posts. Someone had torn down a section of his fence and burned it. Next to the dying fire, placed deliberately where he would see it, was Lydia's manila folder. Evan picked it up with shaking hands and opened it. Inside were the documents she'd shown the deputy. The dates were wrong. The signatures looked forged. The whole thing was a fabrication, but a sophisticated one. A note was paperclipped to the front. This is just the beginning. Save yourself the trouble and sign over the lake. You can't win against the community. Evan stood there in the darkness, the folder in his hands, the destroyed fence before him, and made a decision. Lydia Warwick had just declared war on the wrong family. His grandfather had taught him many things at this lake, but the most important lesson was this: never let anyone take what's rightfully yours. He walked back to the house, his mind already racing with plans. First thing in the morning, he would call a surveyor, then a lawyer. He'd document everything, gather evidence, build a case that would expose Lydia's scheme. But for now, he sat on the porch steps, looking out toward the lake. He could no longer see in the darkness, but knew was there. His grandfather's lake. His lake. I'm not letting them take it, Grandpa, he said quietly to the night air. I promise. The next morning came too quickly. Evan had barely slept, spending most of the night organizing documents and researching property law online. By 7 a.m., he was at the county recorder's office, waiting for them to open. The clerk, a middle-aged woman named Dorothy, who'd known his grandfather, looked concerned when Evan explained what he needed. The Harper property? Of course I remember it. Your grandfather was very particular about keeping all his records updated. She pulled up the digital files on her computer, then frowned. That's strange. What's strange? There's a notation here from last month. Someone requested copies of all the Harper property records. Let me see who... Oh, it was someone from the Pine Hollow HOA. A Miss Warwick. Evan felt his stomach turn. She was researching my property. Appears so. She requested copies of everything, deeds, surveys, tax records, even the old easement agreements from the 60s. Dorothy looked at him over her reading glasses. Is there a problem? You could say that, Evan replied grimly. He spent the next 2 hours getting certified copies of everything, creating a paper trail that couldn't be disputed. Dorothy helped him understand some of the more complex legal language, pointing out key sections that confirmed his ownership. Your grandfather was smart, she said, pulling up another document. Look here. He had the property resurveyed in 1995 and filed it with both the county and the state. He even had it notarized by 3 different notaries. It's like he knew someone might try to challenge it someday. By noon, Evan had an appointment with a surveyor who could come out the next day. The cost would eat into his savings, but it was necessary. He also called 3 law firms, though only one called him back, and they wanted a $5,000 retainer just to review the case. That afternoon, he drove back to the lake, parking on the main road and walking in to avoid any claims of trespassing. What he saw made his blood boil. The HOA had been busy. They'd installed a chain-link fence around their lake, complete with a gate secured by a combination lock. New signs were posted every 20 feet. Private property, Pine Hollow HOA members only, and no trespassing, violators will be prosecuted. But worse than the fence and signs was what was happening inside. A crew was setting up what looked like party equipment. Tables, chairs, a large tent. A banner being unfurled read, Pine Hollow HOA Annual Lake Day. Suggested donation $50 per family. Evan took out his phone and started recording. As he filmed, a familiar voice called out behind him. I thought I made myself clear last night. He turned to find Lydia Warwick approaching, flanked by Nate Powell and another board member he didn't recognize. She was wearing different clothes, but the same superior expression. "I'm standing on a public road," Evan said, continuing to film. "Unless the HOA owns that too." "Don't be clever, Mr. Harford. It doesn't suit you." She glanced at his phone. "And I wouldn't post that anywhere if I were you. Our lawyer is very good with defamation cases." "It's only defamation if it's false," Evan countered. "Prove it's false," Lydia said with a cold smile. "Oh, wait, you can't. Because I have documentation showing this lake belongs to the community. You have some old papers from a dead man who can't testify on your behalf." The cruelty of referring to his grandfather that way made Evan's hands clench into fists, but he forced himself to remain calm. "Those documents you showed last night are forgeries," he said evenly. "Prove it," Lydia repeated. "Take me to court. Spend tens of thousands of dollars you don't have. Meanwhile, we'll be enjoying our community lake, hosting our events, building our community. And you'll be remembered as the selfish outsider who tried to steal from families and children." Nate Powell stepped forward. "Yeah, my kids were really looking forward to swimming here this summer. Why do you hate children?" "Harper." It was such an absurd statement that Evan almost laughed. Almost. "I don't hate children. I hate thieves," Evan said, looking directly at Lydia. Her expression darkened. "Be very careful, Mr. Harford. Slander is a serious offense. So is fraud. So is trespassing. So is destruction of property." Evan held up his phone, showing he was still recording. "Should I continue listing crimes?" "You have 24 hours, Lydia said suddenly. 24 hours for what?" "To accept our generous offer. Sign over the lake to the HOA and we'll forget this unfortunate incident. We'll even allow you visiting privileges with proper notice, of course. You want me to give you my property in exchange for permission to visit it." "I want you to do what's best for the community," Lydia said. "Your grandfather's selfishness denied generations of families the joy of this beautiful resource. Don't make the same mistake." "My grandfather wasn't selfish. He just didn't like thieves either." Lydia's composure cracked slightly, a flash of anger crossing her face before she regained control. 24 hours, Mr. Harford. After that, things will become unpleasant." She turned and walked away, her followers trailing behind. Nate looked back once, drawing his finger across his throat in what he probably thought was an intimidating gesture, but mostly looked ridiculous. Evan stood there for a long moment, watching as the party setup continued. Families were starting to arrive, children running toward the lake with excitement, parents carrying coolers and beach toys. None of them knew they were trespassing on private property. To them, this was just a community event. That evening, as Evan sat at his kitchen table surrounded by legal documents and laptop screens full of property law websites, there was a knock at his door. He opened it cautiously to find Clara Hayes standing there looking nervous. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said quickly. "Can I come in? I don't want anyone to see me here." Evan stepped aside and Clara hurried in, glancing back at the road as if expecting to be followed. "I didn't want to be there last night," she said once the door was closed. "Lydia insisted all board members had to attend. She said it was about community safety." "Community safety?" Clara nodded, wringing her hands. "She told us you were a dangerous squatter who'd been making threats. But I've lived here for 15 years. I remember your grandfather. I know this is your land." "Then why didn't you say something?" "Have you ever tried to stand up to Lydia Warwick?" Clara asked with a bitter laugh. "She has files on everyone. Every tiny HOA violation, every late payment, every time someone's dog barked too loud. She uses it like weapons." Evan offered her a seat and some coffee, which she accepted gratefully. "What do you know about Harold Vance?" Evan asked. Clara's expression darkened. Harold was the treasurer before he disappeared. There were rumors about missing funds, but nothing was ever proven. Lydia was the one who discovered the discrepancies, or so she said. After he left, she took over most of his duties temporarily, but that was 5 years ago. And these documents she has about the lake. "I've never actually seen them," Clara admitted. "She always just references them, waves the folder around, but when I asked to review them for the board minutes, she said they were sealed for legal reasons." Evan showed Clara his grandfather's letter refusing to donate the lake. She read it slowly, her face paling. "She knew," Clara whispered. "She knew it was your property all along." Will you testify to what you just told me if this goes to court? Clara looked terrified but nodded slowly. I'm 73 years old. What's she going to do, ruin my retirement? I've stayed quiet too long. After Clara left sneaking out the back door like a spy in a bad movie, Evan felt a small spark of hope. He had an ally, even if she was a reluctant one. His phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Harper. The voice was male, nervous. This is Luke Carver, the deputy from last night. What do you want? Look, I can't talk long. I just wanted to say be careful. Lydia Warwick has connections. People owe her favors. Don't trust anyone from the county offices. Including you. There was a long pause. Especially me. I'm sorry I shouldn't have called. The line went dead. Evan stared at his phone, processing this new information. The deputy's warning suggested the corruption went deeper than just the HOA. How many people were in Lydia's pocket? That night, unable to sleep again. Evan drove back to the lake. He parked a half-mile away and approached on foot through the woods, the way he had as a kid when he wanted to sneak out fishing without his grandfather knowing. The HOA's party had ended hours ago, but evidence remained. Trash bags piled by the new fence waiting for pickup, forgotten toys on the beach, and something else that made Evan's blood run cold. Survey stakes. Fresh ones driven into the ground in a pattern that encompassed not just the lake, but an additional 30 feet of his property all around it. They were planning to steal even more land. He took photos of everything using his phone's flash sparingly to avoid detection. As he documented the survey stakes, he heard voices approaching. Should be done by next week, Lydia's voice carried through the night air. She was with someone walking along the shore. Once we establish adverse possession, even if he tries to fight it, we'll have precedent. Adverse possession requires open and notorious use for 7 years, a man's voice replied. Evan didn't recognize it. You've only been using it for 1. On paper, we've been using it for 7 years, Lydia said with a laugh. Amazing what backdated documents can do. Harold Vance was very thorough in his record-keeping before he disappeared. You mean before you framed him for embezzlement? I didn't frame anyone. Harold was stealing. I caught him. He ran. The fact that I've been able to use his legacy to benefit the community is just making the best of a bad situation. And Harper is a minor inconvenience. He'll either sign over the property or be driven out. I've done it before. The Mitchells and the Colemans and the Petersons, all of them had property the community needed. All of them were too selfish to share. Evan recorded every word, his phone hidden in his jacket pocket. This was it. This was the confession he needed. What if he goes to the real police, not your pet deputy? Then we bury him in legal fees. The HOA has a war chest of $500,000, thanks to all those special assessments and event fees. How much do you think a warehouse worker has saved up? They were moving away now, their voices fading. Evan waited until he was sure they were gone, then carefully made his way back through the woods. As he reached his truck, his phone buzzed. A text from Lydia. I know you were there. The cameras see everything. You have 12 hours left. Evan looked back toward the lake. He hadn't seen any cameras, but then again, he'd been focused on the survey stakes. Lydia was always one step ahead, or at least wanted him to think she was. He drove home, uploaded all his photos and recordings to 3 different cloud services and emailed copies to himself and to a lawyer friend from college who lived in another state. If something happened to him, at least the evidence would survive. The next morning, Saturday, Evan woke to the sound of machinery. He looked out his window to see a work crew installing something at the end of his driveway. By the time he got dressed and outside, they were finishing up. A new gate blocked his driveway, complete with a coded lock. A sign read, Private Drive, HOA access only. What the hell is this? Evan demanded. The work crew foreman shrugged. Just doing what we're told, man. HOA says this is their access road now. This is my property. You can't do this. Take it up with them, the foreman said, handing Evan a business card for the HOA office. We're just contractors. Evan tried calling the sheriff's office, but the dispatcher said it was a civil matter. He called the real police, not the sheriff's department, and they said it was outside their jurisdiction. Every avenue seemed blocked. His phone rang. Lydia. How do you like the gate? She asked pleasantly. For HOA members, the code is 1234. Very easy to remember. For non-members, well, I suppose you'll have to park on the street and walk. This is illegal imprisonment, Evan said. This is community property management. Check your property lines, Mr. Harford. That easement road has always belonged to the HOA. No, it hasn't. I have the documents. Your documents are outdated. Our documents are current. Have a pleasant day. She hung up. Evan stood staring at the locked gate, blocking his own driveway fury and disbelief warring in his chest. He pulled out his phone and started recording, narrating the situation for evidence. Saturday morning, 8 a.m. The HOA has installed a locked gate on my private driveway blocking access to my own home. He panned the camera across the installation, capturing every detail. A car pulled up behind him. Sophia Bennett, a 29-year-old marketing freelancer who'd moved to Pine Hollow 6 months ago. She rolled down her window, looking at the gate with raised eyebrows. Let me guess, she said. Lydia Warwick. How did you know? Sophia parked and got out, pulling her own phone to take pictures. She tried this with my mom 3 years ago in Riverside Heights. Different HOA, same tactics. Mom ended up having to sell her house. What happened? Fabricated violations, mysterious fees, constant harassment. Mom was 78, couldn't handle the stress. Sold for 30% under market value to one of Lydia's associates. Sophia's expression hardened. I've been documenting everything she does here for my blog. This is going to make great content. A blog. HOA Horror Diary. I've got 12,000 subscribers who love stories about overreaching associations. Mind if I interview you? Evan hesitated, then nodded. If Lydia wanted to play dirty, he'd fight back with public exposure. They spent an hour recording with Evan, laying out the entire story from the beginning. Sophia asked pointed questions, drawing out details that painted a clear picture of systematic harassment and fraud. The thing is, Sophia said as they wrapped up, she's done this before, but nobody's ever fought back effectively. They either give up or get crushed by legal fees. I'm not giving up. Good. Because I've been digging into some things. Did you know the HOA's financial reports don't show any income from lake events? Evan's head snapped toward her. What? I've been attending board meetings, recording everything. They claim to have collected thousands in event fees and donations at their lake, but the official financials show nothing. So where's the money going? Before Evan could respond, a familiar truck pulled up. Walter Grayson, 70 years old and Evan's nearest neighbor to the north, climbed out with a toolbox. Heard you might need some help with a gate problem, Walter said with a grin. Walter, I can't ask you to. You didn't ask. I volunteered. Walter pulled out a pair of massive bolt cutters. Your grandpa helped me out of a jam once. Time to return the favor. If you cut that lock, they'll call the cops. Let them. I'd love to explain to a real judge how an HOA thinks they can lock a man out of his own property. Walter positioned the bolt cutters. Besides, I've got something you need to see. But first, let's solve your immediate problem. The lock snapped with a satisfying crack. Walter pushed the gate open, then pulled out a chain and padlock from his truck. Now we lock them out, he said, wrapping the chain around the gate in the open position and securing it with his own lock. See how they like it. Walter, you're going to get us both arrested. Nah, I've been dealing with bureaucratic bullies since before you were born. Come by my place later. I've got documents that'll interest you. As Walter drove away, Sophia was typing rapidly on her phone. This is already going viral in the local Facebook groups. Lydia just made a tactical error. She's given us visual proof of her overreach. That afternoon, Evan visited Walter's property. The old man's house was a testament to self-sufficiency, with solar panels, a well, and gardens that could feed a small army. Walter led him to a study filled with filing cabinets and old maps. Your grandpa and I go way back. Walter began pulling out a yellowed folder. Back in the 70s, the county tried to claim my creek access was public property. Sound familiar? What happened? I fought them. Took 3 years and cost me my first marriage, but I won. Know why? Because I had this. He pulled out a thick document. Conservation easement from 1972. Your grandpa was one of the witnesses. But here's the interesting part, he set up the same protection for your property. Evan's heart raced. A conservation easement means the land can never be developed commercially, can't be seized through eminent domain, can't be transferred without consent from all original signatories or their heirs. Walter grinned. There were 4 signatories. Your grandpa, me, Harold Vance, and Margaret Coleman. Wait, Harold Vance, the missing treasurer. Same one, which means Lydia can't use his supposed documents to claim anything because he'd have to violate his own signature on the conservation easement. This is huge. This could end everything. Could if we can prove those documents are fake, but there's more. Walter pulled out another paper. Margaret Coleman died 2 years ago. Her heir is her nephew in California. I tracked him down. He's never heard of any lake transfer and is willing to testify to that. Walter, you're a genius. Not a genius, just old and patient. Your grandpa knew something like this might happen someday. He was smart enough to protect the land legally. Walter's expression grew serious. But Lydia's smart too. She's got judges and her pocket county officials on her payroll. This won't be easy. That evening, Evan attended the HOA meeting armed with his new information. The community center was packed with many residents curious about the drama unfolding. Lydia sat at the head table, her HOA folder prominently displayed, surrounded by her board members like a queen holding court. Before we begin, Lydia announced, I want to address the vandalism that occurred this morning. Someone destroyed HOA property and removed a legally installed security gate. That gate was blocking my driveway, Evan said, standing up. Please wait to be recognized before speaking, Mr. Harford, Lydia said coolly. As I was saying, we will be pressing charges for destruction of property. I'd like to see the permit for that gate installation, Clara Hayes said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. All HOA modifications require permits and board approval. I don't recall voting on any gate installation. Lydia's eyes narrowed. It was an emergency security measure. That's not in our bylaws, Clara continued. I've been reviewing them. Emergency measures still require a board vote within 24 hours. When was this vote? We'll discuss this in executive session, Lydia said quickly. Executive sessions are for personnel matters only, Clara pressed. This is a property issue. It should be discussed openly. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Other residents began asking questions about procedures, permits, and the mysterious lake ownership documents. Furthermore, Evan said, not waiting to be recognized, I have here a conservation easement from 1972 that proves the lake cannot be transferred to the HOA without consent from all original signatories. He held up the document Walter had given him. Lydia's face went pale for just a moment before she recovered. That document is outdated and superseded by more recent agreements, she said. Agreements signed by whom? Harold Vance, the man who disappeared 5 years ago. Evan looked around the room. Has anyone here actually seen these supposed documents? Multiple residents shook their heads. Even some board members looked uncomfortable. I move for a formal audit of all HOA documents related to the lake property, Clara said, including a review by an independent lawyer. Seconded, called someone from the back. The motion is out of order, Lydia said quickly. No, it's not, Clara replied, pulling out a copy of the bylaws. Section 15.3. Any member may request an audit of HOA documents with a second from another member. The board must comply within 30 days. The meeting devolved into chaos. Residents were shouting questions, demanding to see documents, asking about missing funds. Lydia tried to maintain control, but the carefully constructed narrative was crumbling. This meeting is adjourned, Lydia announced, gathering her papers. You can't adjourn without a vote, Clara called out. But Lydia was already leaving her loyal board members scrambling to follow. As the crowd dispersed, Sophia appeared at Evan's elbow. I got it all on video. This is going to be beautiful. Tyrant HOA president flees from questions, that's the headline. Deputy Luke Carver was waiting by Evan's truck when he got outside. The deputy looked haggard, stressed. We need to talk, Luke said quietly. Not here. Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., the old fishing spot on the north side of the lake. Come alone. Why should I trust you? Because Lydia's planning something big, and you're not going to see it coming. I'm trying to help. Like you helped last night when you kicked me off my own property. Luke flinched. I had no choice. She has things on me, on a lot of people. Just meet me tomorrow, please. He walked away before Evan could respond. That night, Evan couldn't sleep. He went through more of his grandfather's papers, finding additional evidence of ownership, old photographs of the property lines, even a hand-drawn map from the 1960s showing exactly where the lake boundaries were. At 3 a.m., his phone rang. Unknown number. "You made a mistake tonight." Lydia's voice was cold, controlled. "I offered you a peaceful solution. Now you'll get war." "Bring it on," Evan said. "Oh, I intend to. Check your email." The line went dead. Evan opened his email to find a message from a law firm. Lydia was suing him for defamation, trespassing, harassment, and destruction of property. The damages sought were $500,000. Attached was another document, a lien on his ranch house for unpaid HOA assessments dating back 5 years totaling $50,000. Evan's hands shook. He didn't have that kind of money. The ranch was all he had left of his grandfather, and now they were trying to take that too. He called the only lawyer who'd returned his calls earlier. Even at 3 a.m., the man answered. "Mr. Harper, I expected you'd be calling." "You knew about this." Lydia Warwick is notorious in legal circles. She's driven out 7 families using these exact tactics. The lawsuits are bogus, but defending against them will cost you everything. So what do I do? You have 3 options. Give her what she wants, fight, and probably lose everything, or find something on her that's bigger than what she has on you. What do you mean? I mean she's dirty, but she's also smart. She covers her tracks. But everyone makes mistakes. Find hers. After hanging up, Evan made a decision. He wouldn't wait for the morning meeting with Luke. He grabbed his keys and headed for the lake, approaching through the woods again. The HOA had been busy. The fence was now complete, encompassing not just the lake, but a full 50 feet of his property beyond it. Security lights had been installed, motion-activated and blindingly bright. Cameras were mounted on poles every 30 feet. But Evan knew these woods better than anyone. He'd spent his entire childhood exploring every tree, every rock, every hidden path. He found the old deer trail that led to a rock outcropping overlooking the lake, a spot hidden from the cameras by thick pine branches. From his vantage point, he could see activity at the lake despite the late hour. A van was parked by the shore and figures were moving equipment. As his eyes adjusted, he recognized one of them, Nate Powell. They were installing something in the water. Evan pulled out his phone using the zoom to see better. It looked like some kind of pump system with pipes running into the lake. He recorded everything staying silent and still. After an hour, the van left, but not before Evan caught the license plate and the company name on the side, Warwick Environmental Services. Lydia owned an environmental company. The same Lydia who was about to claim his lake had contamination issues requiring expensive cleanup that only her company could provide. The pieces were falling into place. At 6 a.m., Evan met Luke at the north fishing spot. The deputy was already there, nervously checking his phone. "You came," Luke said with relief. "Start talking." Luke took a deep breath. 5 years ago, I was going through a divorce, drinking too much. Got a DUI, but managed to keep it quiet. Lydia found out somehow. She's been holding it over me ever since. So you're her puppet. I'm her slave. But I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Luke pulled out a flash drive. Everything's on here. Records of her bribes to county officials, the fake documents she created, even recordings of her discussing how to force people out of their homes. Why give this to me? Because you're the first person who stood up to her with a real chance of winning. Your grandfather's conservation easement is rock solid. She knows it, which is why she's going nuclear with the lawsuits. What's she planning? Tomorrow night there's going to be an environmental disaster at the lake. Massive contamination that threatens the whole community. She'll use it to force an emergency seizure of the property for cleanup. Her company will get the contract, and by the time it's sorted out legally, she'll have possession. That's insane. That's Lydia. She did the same thing to the Petersons' pond, contaminated it, seized it, cleaned it up, and then sold it to a developer for 10 times what the cleanup cost. We have to stop her. We can't, but we can document it. If we catch her in the act record, everything we might have enough to bring her down. Might. She owns half the judges in the county. It won't be easy. Luke stood to leave, then paused. Your grandfather was a good man. He helped my dad once when no one else would. I'm sorry I didn't honor that until now. After Luke left, Evan called Sophia and Walter, arranging to meet at Walter's house. They needed a plan, and they needed it fast. Walter's military background showed as he laid out a tactical map of the lake area. If they're going to contaminate the water, they'll need access to multiple points for it to look natural. Here, here, and here. He marked 3 locations. We position ourselves at these spots with cameras. I can live stream it, Sophia said. If it's live, they can't claim we edited the footage. What about backup? Evan asked. I've got some old army buddies who owe me favors, Walter said. They'll be there. They spent the day preparing. Evan installed hidden trail cameras around the lake using his knowledge of the land to place them where they wouldn't be detected. Sophia set up multiple streaming devices and backup batteries. Walter coordinated with his contacts. That evening, as Evan was loading equipment into his truck, Clara Hayes arrived at his ranch. I've been doing some digging, she said, handing him a thick folder. These are the real HOA financial records, not the ones Lydia presents at meetings, but the actual bank statements. Evan opened the folder and his jaw dropped. Over the past 5 years, more than $300,000 had been collected in special assessments and event fees, but only $50,000 was accounted for in the official reports. She's been embezzling, Clara said, just like Harold Vance was accused of, except it was her all along. Will you testify to this? I'll do more than that. I've already sent copies to the state attorney general's office. Clara smiled grimly. I'm 73 years old. What's she going to do to me that time won't do anyway. That night they took their positions. Evan was at the south point, hidden in a blind he'd built as a kid. Sophia was streaming from the east shore, her camera concealed in a fake rock. Walter and 2 of his friends, Vietnam veterans in their 70s but still sharp, covered the north and west approaches. At exactly midnight, vehicles arrived. 3 vans, headlights off, creeping along the access road. Evan started recording as figures emerged carrying large barrels. Through his night vision scope, he could see Lydia directing the operation. She was wearing coveralls and a baseball cap, but her distinctive walk was unmistakable. Nate Powell was there too, along with 4 other people Evan didn't recognize. They began pouring the contents of the barrels into the lake at strategic points. The smell hit Evan even from his hiding spot, industrial chemicals harsh and acrid. Stream is live, Sophia whispered through the radio. 3,000 viewers and climbing. Document everything, Walter replied. No mistakes. For an hour, they recorded the systematic contamination of the lake. Lydia's crew was thorough, spreading the chemicals across multiple points to make it look like natural runoff. They even placed empty chemical containers on Evan's property, clearly trying to frame him. Then something unexpected happened. Real police arrived. Not sheriff's deputies, but state police lights flashing officers in tactical gear, spreading out to surround the contamination crew. State police, everyone freeze hands where we can see them. Lydia tried to run, but was tackled within 10 feet. Nate Powell dropped to his knees, hands up, blubbering about, just following orders. The others surrendered without resistance. As Lydia was being handcuffed, she looked around wildly and spotted Evan emerging from his hiding spot. You, she screamed. This is your doing. You planted this. It's all fake. Ma'am, we've been monitoring your communications for 3 weeks, the lead state officer said. We have recordings of you planning this operation. It turned out Clara's report to the Attorney General had triggered an investigation. They'd been building a case but needed to catch Lydia in the act. The conservation easement was the key, the officer explained to Evan later. Federal protection meant this became our jurisdiction. Your local sheriff couldn't protect her from us. As the sun rose over the lake, now cordoned off as a crime scene, Evan stood with his allies, Walter, Sophia, Clara, and even Luke, who'd turned state's witness in exchange for immunity. Your grandpa would be proud, Walter said, clapping Evan on the shoulder. We're not done yet, Evan replied. She contaminated the lake. It needs to be cleaned up. Already handled, the state officer said, approaching with paperwork. The state will handle remediation, and Miss Warwick's assets will be seized to pay for it, including her company. What about the HOA? Based on the financial fraud evidence, it will be dissolved by court order. All illegally collected fees will be returned to homeowners. Sophia was interviewing residents who'd gathered to watch the arrest. Many shared stories of Lydia's harassment, properties, lost families driven away. The full scope of her corruption was staggering. 23 properties in 4 different communities over 15 years, one investigator revealed. She built a real estate empire on stolen land. That afternoon, sitting on his grandfather's dock, Evan finally felt the weight lift from his shoulders. The lake would need months of cleanup, but it would recover. The land was safe, protected by law, and now by precedent. His phone rang. An unknown number, but he answered anyway. Mr. Harper. This is Harold Vance. Evan nearly dropped the phone. You're alive. Barely. I've been in hiding for 5 years, gathering evidence against Lydia. I heard about what happened. I want to come forward, testify, help make sure she never gets out. Where are you? Close. I've been watching, waiting for someone to stand up to her. You did what I couldn't. Your grandfather would be proud. He was the only one who believed me when I tried to expose her the first time. They arranged to meet the next day. Harold's evidence would be the final nail in Lydia's coffin. That evening, the HOA held an emergency meeting. With Lydia arrested and most of her supporters fleeing association with her, Clara was elected interim president. Her first motion was to officially recognize Evan's ownership of the lake and apologize for the association's actions. The vote was unanimous. As Evan walked back to his truck, residents approached him one by one. Some apologized for believing Lydia's lies. Others thanked him for standing up to her. A few admitted they'd been victims, too afraid to speak up. What will you do with the lake? One young mother asked. Will you let our kids swim there when it's clean? Evan thought about his grandfather, about the lessons learned at the water's edge, about the difference between owning something and hoarding it. The lake stays in my family, he said. But families are meant to share good things. Once it's clean, everyone's welcome. No fees, no permits, no HOA oversight, just neighbors being neighbors. The cheer that went up was worth every sleepless night, every legal threat, every moment of doubt. Harold Vance looked nothing like the wealthy treasurer who'd disappeared 5 years ago. His hair had gone completely gray, his expensive suits replaced by worn jeans and a faded flannel shirt. He sat across from Evan at a diner 30 miles from Pine Hollow, hands wrapped around a coffee cup, eyes constantly checking the entrance. I've been living under an assumed name in Montana, Harold began, his voice rough from years of silence. Working construction, paying cash for everything, waiting for someone to finally stand up to her. Why didn't you go to the police? Evan asked. Harold laughed bitterly. With what? She'd destroyed my credibility, planted evidence of embezzlement so perfectly that even I started to doubt my innocence. She had photos of me at casinos I'd never visited, bank records for accounts I'd never opened. The woman is thorough. But you have evidence against her. Harold pulled out a battered laptop. 5 years of evidence. Every property she stole, every family she destroyed, every official she bribed. I've been tracking her from a distance, documenting everything. He opened file after file. The Mitchell's Pond seized through fake environmental violations. The Coleman Creek access taken via forged easement agreements. The Peterson farmland stolen using fabricated tax liens. Each case meticulously documented with photos, recordings, and paper trails. Your grandfather's lake was going to be her masterpiece, Harold said. 50 acres of prime waterfront property. She had a developer lined up to pay $3 million for it once she had control. $3 million? Your land is worth more than you know. The conservation easement actually makes it more valuable to certain buyers' tax breaks for maintaining protected land while still developing around it. Harold pulled up another document. Look at this. She incorporated a shell company 2 years ago specifically for this purchase. The document showed Pine Hollow Development LLC, with Lydia as the sole proprietor registered at an address that turned out to be a P.O. box. She was playing the long game, Harold continued. Drive you out, seize the property through the HOA, transfer it to her shell company, then sell to the developer. Clean profit with no connection to her. Except now she's in custody. For now, she's got good lawyers' connections. Don't celebrate yet. Harold's expression darkened. She destroyed my life because I discovered her embezzlement. Lost my wife. My kids won't speak to me. Everyone thinks I'm a thief. Even with her arrested, that doesn't go away. We'll clear your name, Evan said firmly. Your evidence plus what we've gathered. It's not that simple. She's got a story for everything and explanation, someone else to blame. That's why I need you to understand something. Harold leaned forward. She keeps records of everything, not digital. She's too smart for that. Physical documents in a safe nobody knows about. Where? Her office at the HOA building has a false wall behind the filing cabinets. I installed it myself back when I trusted her. She doesn't know I kept a key. Harold slid a small key across the table. Everything's in there. The real books, the bribes, the blackmail material on half the town. But here's the thing, it's booby-trapped. Booby-trapped. Not explosives, nothing that dramatic. But there's a silent alarm connected to her phone and a camera that uploads to a cloud server. If you open it wrong, she'll know, and the evidence will disappear. So how do we open it right? Harold smiled for the first time. You need to disconnect the backup battery first. It's hidden in the ceiling tile directly above. Then you have exactly 60 seconds to enter the code before the failsafe triggers. What's the code? The date she was elected HOA president for the first time. November 15, 2009, 111509. Evan memorized the number. When should we do this? Tonight. While she's still in custody, her lawyer is probably watching her phone. If the alarm triggers, they'll send someone immediately. That afternoon, Evan met with the state police detective handling Lydia's case. Detective Sarah Martinez was a no-nonsense woman in her 40s who'd been investigating HOA fraud for years. Warwick is the worst I've seen, Martinez said, reviewing the files. But she's also smart. Her lawyer is already filing motions to dismiss based on entrapment, illegal surveillance, constitutional violations, throwing everything at the wall. Will any of it stick? Probably not, but it'll delay things. Meanwhile, she's out on bail as of an hour ago. Evan's blood ran cold. She's out. $500,000 bail paid in cash. She's wearing an ankle monitor and can't leave the county, but she's free pending trial. Martinez noticed Evan's expression. Don't worry, there's a restraining order. She can't come within 500 feet of you or your property. That won't stop her from sending others. Which is why we're watching her. But be careful. Desperate people do desperate things. That evening, Evan, Sophia, and Walter met at the HOA office. The building was dark yellow crime scene tape across the main entrance. But Harold had told them about a service entrance in the back one that didn't have an alarm. Walter picked the lock with surprising skill. Military intelligence 1969 to 1,975 inches, he explained at Evan's look. Some skills you don't forget. Inside, they moved carefully through the darkness using small flashlights. The office was eerily quiet, papers still scattered on desks from when the state police had searched it. Lydia's private office was at the back, her name still on the door in gold letters. Inside, filing cabinets lined one wall exactly as Harold had described. Camera first, Evan whispered, pointing to the ceiling. Walter boosted him up, and Evan carefully removed the ceiling tile. Sure enough, there was a small battery pack connected to a thin wire. He disconnected it, then dropped back down. 60 seconds starting, now. They pushed the filing cabinets aside, revealing a section of wall that looked identical to the rest. But when Evan pressed where Harold had indicated, a panel clicked open, revealing a digital keypad. 111509, he typed. A soft beep, then the wall section swung inward, revealing a hidden room the size of a large closet. Inside were filing boxes, each labeled with years and names. A small desk held more documents and a laptop. Holy shit, Sophia breathed, already recording. This is like a criminal's archive. They worked quickly, documenting everything without removing anything that would come later with proper warrants. The files were damning. Payments to county officials with dates and amounts. Blackmail files on dozens of residents. Detailed plans for property seizures going back a decade. Then Evan found the file labeled Harper Lake. Inside were documents dating back 7 years long before his grandfather had died. Photos of the property taken from various angles, assessment reports, even a geological survey showing potential mineral rights. She's been planning this since before my grandfather died, Evan said, his voice tight with anger. Look at this, Walter said, holding up another file. She had someone inside the county recorder's office changing documents. That's how the property lines kept moving. Sophia was photographing everything, creating a digital backup of the evidence. This is enough to put her away for life. Only if it's admissible, Evan reminded them. We need to do this legally. They carefully put everything back exactly as they'd found it, then left through the service entrance. Once outside, Evan called Detective Martinez. We need a warrant for Lydia Warwick's hidden office, he said. I have probable cause information from a confidential informant. How confidential? Harold Vance confidential. There was a pause. He's alive and willing to testify. I'll have a warrant within the hour. Don't go back in there and don't tell anyone else about this. While they waited, Evan's phone rang. Unknown number, but he recognized the voice immediately. Hello, Mr. Harper. Lydia's voice was calm, controlled. Nothing like the screaming woman who'd been arrested. I hear you've been busy. I don't think you should be calling me. Restraining order, remember. Oh, I'm not threatening you. I'm offering you one last chance. Drop everything, sign over the lake, and I'll make all your problems go away. My only problem is currently wearing an ankle monitor. She laughed. You think you've won. I've been doing this for 15 years. I have judges who owe me favors, prosecutors who need my support, witnesses who will say whatever I tell them to say. Not anymore. We found your little archive. The silence stretched for several seconds. When Lydia spoke again, her voice had lost its calm. You have no idea what you've done. Those files aren't just about property. There are people in there who will do anything to keep their secrets buried. Then they should have thought about that before breaking the law. You naive fool. You think this is about law, this is about power, and you just declared war on people who have a lot more of it than you do. The line went dead. Within minutes, cars started arriving at the HOA office. Not police cars, expensive sedans, SUVs with tinted windows. People in suits emerged, some Evan recognized as city council members, others he didn't know. They're trying to destroy evidence, Walter said. But then state police vehicles arrived, sirens blazing. Detective Martinez stepped out with a small army of officers and federal agents. Nobody moves, she announced through a megaphone. This is an active crime scene and federal investigation. Anyone attempting to enter will be arrested for obstruction of justice. The suited figures retreated to their vehicles, but not before several were photographed and identified. The web of corruption was unraveling in real time. The warrant execution was methodical and thorough. The hidden room was discovered based on informant information and its contents cataloged by federal agents. Every document was photographed, tagged, and bagged as evidence. By dawn 17, more arrest warrants had been issued. County commissioners, building inspectors, even a judge were taken into custody. The local news had arrived and Sophia was giving interviews about her investigation. This started with one man fighting for his family's lake, she told reporters, and uncovered a criminal conspiracy that infected our entire county government. Evan stood by his truck exhausted but vindicated. His phone rang, his mother calling from Florida where she'd retired. I saw the news, she said. Your grandfather would be so proud. He always said that land was worth fighting for. It wasn't just about the land, Mom. It was about standing up to bullies. That's what he would be proud of. The Harper men never backed down from a righteous fight. As Evan drove home, he passed the lake. The fence was being removed by state workers, the HOA signs taken down. The contamination was being cleaned with Lydia's seized assets, paying for every penny. But at his ranch, a surprise waited. Several cars were parked in his driveway and people were gathered on his porch. For a moment his heart raced. Had Lydia's associates come for revenge? Then he recognized them. The Mitchells whose pond had been stolen. The Colemans who'd lost their creek access. The Petersons driven from their farm. Families Lydia had destroyed over the years. We wanted to thank you, Mrs. Mitchell said, tears in her eyes. You did what none of us could do. You fought back and won. I had help, Evan said, gesturing to Walter and Sophia who'd followed him home. But you started it, Mr. Peterson said. You gave us hope that bullies don't always win. They spent the morning sharing stories, planning legal strategies to recover their properties, building a community of resistance against corruption. It was exactly the kind of gathering his grandfather would have loved. That afternoon, Harold Vance arrived with his lawyer ready to give his official statement. He looked different, lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted. I can finally stop running, he said. 5 years of hiding, and it's finally over. What will you do now? Evan asked. First clear my name, then help prosecute Lydia and everyone involved. After that, Harold shrugged. Maybe I'll just go fishing. Your grandfather always said the lake was perfect for bass. Once it's cleaned up, you're welcome anytime. The state police had set up a mobile command center at the community center, and residents streamed in to give statements. Stories of harassment, intimidation, and fraud poured out. Lydia's reign of terror had affected hundreds of people in ways small and large. Detective Martinez pulled Evan aside. "You should know Lydia's lawyer is pushing for a plea deal. She's offering to testify against everyone else in exchange for reduced charges. You're not going to take it. That's up to the federal prosecutor. But with the evidence you helped uncover, we might not need her testimony." That evening, as Evan sat on his porch watching the sunset, his phone buzzed with a news alert. HOA president arrested in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme was trending nationally. The story had gone viral, with thousands of comments from people sharing their own HOA horror stories. Sophia arrived with her laptop, showing him the response to her blog posts and videos. 3 million views in the last 24 hours, she said. Publishers are asking for a book deal. "You should write it," Evan said. "Only if you'll help. This is your story." It's everyone's story. Every person who's been bullied by someone abusing their power. As night fell, Evan walked down to the lake. The contamination cleanup crews had left for the day, but their equipment remained ready for tomorrow's work. The water was still off limits, but just seeing it free from fences and signs was enough. A splash in the water caught his attention. A family of beavers had returned building a dam in the inlet where they'd lived years ago before Lydia's harassment drove them away. Nature was already beginning to reclaim what had been taken. Walter appeared beside him, holding 2 beers. "Thought you could use one of these." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars reflect on the water despite the contamination. The lake would heal. The community would heal. Justice, however delayed, was finally being served. "Your grandpa and I used to stand right here," Walter said finally. "He'd talk about leaving something better for the next generation. Not just the land, but the values. Standing up for what's right, protecting what matters, fighting bullies, even when they seem too powerful to beat." "I almost gave up," Evan admitted. "When she filed those lawsuits, put the lien on the house, I thought I was going to lose everything." "But you didn't give up. That's what matters." Walter clinked his beer against Evan's. "And now a lot of other people won't give up either because you showed them it's possible to win." A car pulled up and Luke Carver got out. The former deputy, now having resigned from the sheriff's department, looked uncertain. "I wanted to apologize again," he said, "and to let you know I'm testifying tomorrow. Full cooperation with the federal investigation." "That took courage," Evan said. "Not as much as what you did. Standing up to her when you had everything to lose." Luke paused. "I've been offered a position with the state police. Detective Martinez put in a word for me. Said people who can admit their mistakes and make them right are rare." "You'll be a good state trooper," Walter said. "You've learned what happens when good people do nothing." As Luke left, more cars arrived. Clara Hayes with homemade pie. The Bennetts with their children. Other neighbors, some who'd supported Lydia, some who'd stayed silent, all coming to acknowledge what had happened and what had been prevented. An impromptu gathering formed, people sharing food and stories. Someone brought a guitar, and soon old campfire songs drifted across the water. It was the kind of community gathering that should have been happening all along without fees or permits or HOA approval. "This is what she was really stealing," Clara said, gesturing at the gathered neighbors. "Not just land, but community. Making us suspicious of each other, afraid to speak up, divided by her rules and threats." Around midnight, as the gathering wound down, Evan's phone rang. Detective Martinez. "Thought you should know Lydia just fired her lawyer and hired a new team. They're going for an insanity defense, claiming the stress of HOA leadership caused a mental breakdown." "That's ridiculous." "Of course it is, but it might play to a jury. Mental health issues are sympathetic." Martinez paused. "There's something else. We've been going through her files and we found plans for at least 40 more properties across the state. This wasn't just about Pine Hollow. She was building an empire. All through HOAs. It's the perfect vehicle for property theft. Most people don't understand their rights. HOAs have broad powers, and by the time victims realize what's happening, they're too broke from legal fees to fight back. So what do? We make sure she never gets the chance to do it again. Your testimony will be crucial. You're the one who exposed the whole system." After the call, Evan stood alone by the lake. The weight of what had been uncovered, the scope of Lydia's crimes, was staggering. But so was the response, hundreds of people finding courage to speak up, authorities taking action, justice being served. His grandfather had always said the lake was special, not just for its beauty, but for what it represented. Freedom, legacy, the right to own something and pass it on. Lydia had tried to steal all of that, not just from him, but from dozens of families. A text arrived from an unknown number. When he opened it, his blood chilled. "You think you've won, but this isn't over. I have insurance policies you can't imagine. Enjoy your victory while it lasts." It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. Lydia might be facing prison, but she wasn't defeated yet. The war wasn't over. It had just entered a new phase. The federal courthouse in the state capitol was a fortress of marble and glass, its steps crowded with reporters as Lydia Warrick's trial began. Evan sat in the witness waiting room reviewing his testimony with the federal prosecutor Amanda Chen. "She's changed her strategy again," Chen said, flipping through her notes. "No longer insanity. Now she's claiming she was acting on behalf of the community, that everything she did was technically within HOA bylaws." "That's absurd," Evan said. "Absurd but clever. Her new lawyer is Richard Blackstone, one of the best defense attorneys in the country. He specializes in turning clear guilt into reasonable doubt." Through the window, Evan could see protesters holding signs, HOAs equal sign organized crime, and justice for stolen properties. The case had become a national symbol of HOA overreach. Harold Vance sat across from them, looking uncomfortable in his suit. "Blackstone will try to make me the villain," he said, "the embezzling treasurer who fled, leaving poor Lydia to clean up the mess." "Except we have evidence you were framed," Chen reminded him. "Evidence she'll claim I fabricated during my 5 years of hiding." The door opened and Detective Martinez entered. "We have a problem. 3 of our witnesses have suddenly developed memory issues. They're claiming they can't recall specific conversations with Lydia." "She got to them," Evan said, "or someone did. We're investigating, but without their testimony, we lose the conspiracy charges." Chen stood pacing. "We still have the documents from her hidden office, which Blackstone is already moving to have thrown out. He's claiming illegal search, that Harold's information was coerced, that the warrant was invalid." The weight of the situation settled over them. Despite everything they'd uncovered, Lydia might still walk free. "We need something she can't explain away," Evan said. "Something so clear, so undeniable that even Blackstone can't spin it." "Like what?" Harold asked. Before Evan could answer, Sophia burst in, laptop in hand. "You need to see this. I've been going through the hours of footage I shot, and I found something we missed." She pulled up a video from the night of the lake contamination. In the background, barely audible over the sound of chemicals being poured, was Lydia's voice talking on her phone. "Judge Morrison understands the arrangement. $20,000 for a favorable ruling, another $30,000 if he can dismiss the federal charges. Yes, I have it in cash. Tomorrow, usual place." The room went silent. "That's judicial bribery," Chen said slowly. "That's a federal crime with mandatory minimums." "Judge Morrison is supposed to be handling the pretrial motions," Martinez added. Chen was already on her phone calling her supervisor. Within an hour, Judge Morrison had been removed from the case and arrested by federal marshals. The trial was postponed for a week while a new judge was assigned. The delay gave them time to dig deeper. Sophia's footage was enhanced by federal tech specialists, revealing more conversations Lydia had during the contamination. She'd been coordinating with multiple officials, creating a web of corruption that extended to the state capitol. Meanwhile, Evan received another threatening message, this time delivered to his ranch by courier. Inside was a single photo, his mother's house in Florida, taken from across the street. "She's threatening my family now," Evan said, showing it to Martinez. "She's desperate. This is witness intimidation. We'll get protection for your mother." But Evan knew protection could only do so much. Lydia had resources, connections, people who owed her favors. Even from house arrest, she was dangerous. That night, Walter arrived at the ranch with unexpected news. "Found something interesting in my old files," he said, producing a cassette tape. "Your grandfather gave this to me 20 years ago. Said to keep it safe, but never told me what it was." They found an old tape player in the barn and listened. It was a recording of a conversation between Lydia and someone else dated 15 years ago. "The Harper Lake is the prize," Lydia's younger voice said. Once the old man dies, we move on the son. He's weak, working all the time, won't have energy to fight. The conservation easement is a problem, but documents can be altered, witnesses can be convinced to forget. And if he doesn't sell, the other voice asked, then we make his life hell until he does. Same as the others. The tape was proof of premeditation going back 15 years. Lydia had been planning this since before some of her other victims had even moved to Pine Hollow. When the trial resumed, the new judge, Patricia Hoffman, was known for her no-nonsense approach and hatred of corruption. She denied every one of Blackstone's motions to dismiss evidence. Evan testified for 6 hours, walking the jury through every detail of Lydia's scheme. He showed them the photos, played the recordings, presented the documents. Blackstone tried to paint him as a bitter landowner, refusing to share with his community, but the evidence was overwhelming. Harold's testimony was even more damaging. He'd kept meticulous records of Lydia's embezzlement hidden in a safety deposit box in Montana. Bank transfers, forged documents, even recordings of her threatening him if he exposed her. She told me she'd destroy my family if I said anything, Harold testified, his voice breaking. Said she had photos that would make me look like a pedophile, that she'd make sure I died in prison. And did she have such photos? Chen asked. She had doctored photos, deep fakes before they were common. She showed them to me, said no one would believe they were fake. The technical expert who testified next confirmed that the photos found in Lydia's hidden office were indeed sophisticated forgeries created using advanced software to frame Harold for crimes he hadn't committed. But the most dramatic moment came when Clara Hayes testified. She'd been Lydia's secretary for 2 years before joining the board, and she'd kept copies of everything. I knew something was wrong, Clara said, producing box after box of documents. So I made copies of every suspicious transaction, every forged document, every threatening letter she sent. Why didn't you come forward sooner? Chen asked. I was 71 when I started suspecting her. Who would believe an old woman over the respected HOA president? But I kept collecting evidence, waiting for someone brave enough to stand up to her. She looked at Evan. When Mr. Harper fought back, I knew it was time. Blackstone's cross-examination was brutal, but Clara held firm. She'd brought receipts literally. Every crime Lydia had committed was documented in Clara's careful handwriting, dated and notarized by a notary who didn't know what she was notarizing, but confirmed the dates were accurate. The prosecution then called a surprise witness, Lydia's own daughter Jennifer, whom she'd been estranged from for 10 years. My mother is a sociopath, Jennifer said bluntly. I watched her destroy our neighbors when I was growing up. She'd smile at them during the day and plot against them at night. When I confronted her about it, she kicked me out and told everyone I was a drug addict. Were you? Chen asked gently. No, I was a straight-A student who'd just been accepted to medical school. But she spread the rumors so effectively that I lost my scholarships. I had to move across the country to escape her lies. Jennifer produced childhood diaries where she documented her mother's schemes, young observations that corroborated patterns going back 25 years. When Lydia finally took the stand in her own defense, Blackstone tried to present her as a dedicated community servant who'd perhaps bent some rules, but always for the greater good. I transformed Pine Hollow from a collection of rundown properties into a desirable community, Lydia said, her voice pitched to sound reasonable and caring. Property values increased, families moved in, we created something special. By stealing land from rightful owners, Chen challenged, by encouraging community sharing of resources that were being selfishly hoarded, by forging documents, by correcting historical oversights in property distribution, by contaminating a lake with industrial chemicals. For the first time, Lydia faltered. That was a misunderstanding. Chen played the video of Lydia directing the contamination, her voice clear as she instructed where to pour the chemicals for maximum effect. Does that look like a misunderstanding to you? Chen asked the jury. The defense's case crumbled further when Chen introduced evidence of Lydia's offshore accounts containing over $4 million siphoned from various HOAs over 15 years. The money trail was complex but undeniable. During a recess, Evan encountered Lydia in the hallway. Despite her lawyer's attempts to steer her away, she stopped directly in front of him. You've destroyed everything I built. she said, her composure finally cracking completely. 20 years of work improving communities, raising property values. Stealing homes, destroying families, corrupting officials, Evan countered. I gave people what they wanted. Beautiful communities with rules and order. You gave them chaos. I gave them freedom from a tyrant. She laughed bitterly. Freedom. They'll be begging for someone like me within a year. Without strong leadership, HOAs fall apart, property values crash. Neighborhoods decay. Maybe. But that's their choice to make. Not yours to impose. Security separated them, but Lydia's words haunted Evan. Was she right? Would the communities be worse off without her iron-fisted control? The answer came during the victim impact statements. Family after family testified about the damage Lydia had caused. The Mitchells had divorced under the stress of losing their pond. The Petersons' son had attempted suicide after they lost their farm. The Colemans had spent their retirement savings on legal fees. But they also testified about healing. With Lydia's arrest, neighbors had started talking again, helping each other, building real community instead of forced compliance. Property values hadn't crashed, they'd actually increased as buyers learned the tyrannical HOA was being dissolved. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood to read the verdict. On the count of racketeering, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of wire fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of conspiracy to commit environmental terrorism, we find the defendant guilty. The list went on. 47 counts, all guilty. Judge Hoffman's sentencing 2 weeks later was severe but just. Miss Warwick, you perverted the concept of community governance into a criminal enterprise. You destroyed lives for profit and power. I sentence you to 25 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for 15 years. Lydia stood stoically as the sentence was read, but Evan saw her hand shaking. As marshals led her away, she turned one last time to look at him. The hatred in her eyes was pure, but so was the defeat. Outside the courthouse, the crowd erupted in celebration. Victims hugged, cried, thanked Evan, and everyone who'd fought back. Reporters clamored for statements. This isn't just about one corrupt HOA president, Evan told them. It's about standing up to anyone who abuses power, no matter how untouchable they seem. The next months were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. The properties Lydia had stolen were returned to their rightful owners when possible, or their heirs compensated from her seized assets. The Pine Hollow HOA was officially dissolved, replaced by a voluntary community organization with strictly limited powers. Evans Lake was finally cleaned, the contamination removed at state expense. The day the water was declared safe, he held a community barbecue on the shore. Hundreds came, including the Mitchells, with their pond restored, the Petersons back on their farm, the Colemans, with access to their creek again. Harold Vance attended, looking healthier than he had in years. He'd been fully exonerated, his reputation restored, his family relationships slowly healing. Your grandfather saved my evidence, he told Evan. That tape Walter had your grandfather made me record it when I first discovered Lydia's crimes before she drove me out. He knew she was dangerous. He knew evil when he saw it, but he also knew it had to be fought carefully with evidence and allies. Harold looked out over the lake. He'd be proud of what you did. Clara Hayes had become something of a local hero, her courage in keeping records inspiring others to document wrongdoing in their own communities. She'd started a nonprofit to help HOA abuse victims. I'm 75, she said. Might as well use my remaining years for something meaningful. Luke Carver, now a state trooper, stopped by to shake Evan's hand. You taught me something important, he said. Standing up to corruption is hard, but living with cowardice is harder. As the sun set over the lake, Sophia showed Evan her laptop. The book about their fight against Lydia was number 3 on the bestseller list. The movie rights had been optioned. The story had inspired legislative changes in 3 states limiting HOA powers. You've started something, she said. People aren't afraid of their HOAs anymore. Good. No one should live in fear of their neighbors. But even in victory, there were reminders of the cost. Some families had moved away, unable to return, even with their properties restored. Others struggled with the trauma of what they'd endured. The community was healing, but scars remained. That evening, alone at the lake, Evan pulled out his grandfather's fishing rod. He cast a line into the water, not really trying to catch anything, just enjoying the peace. The water was clear again, the sunset painting it gold and crimson. A splash nearby caught his attention. A large bass broke the surface, chasing minnows in the shallows. Life was returning to the lake, resilient and determined. His phone buzzed with a message from his mother. "Watch the news. Your grandfather would be so proud. That lake was his legacy, but you've made it something more, a symbol that ordinary people can fight injustice and win." As darkness fell, fireflies emerged, dancing over the water like tiny stars. Families walking the shore path waved to him, children's laughter echoing across the water. This was what community really looked like, not forced compliance, but chosen connection. Walter appeared with his usual 2 beers. "Thinking about your grandpa. Thinking about everything. How one person's greed almost destroyed so many lives. But didn't, because one person's courage saved them." Walter clinked his beer against Evan's. "You did good, son." "We all did." "True, but someone had to go first. Someone had to say no when everyone else was too scared." Walter looked out over the water. "That's what your grandpa saw in this place, not just a lake, but a line in the sand, a place to make a stand." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge. The legal battles were won. Lydia was in prison, the properties were restored. But Evan knew the real victory was deeper. It was in the renewed sense of community, the courage people had found, the knowledge that corruption could be defeated. A family of deer emerged from the woods, stepping carefully to the water's edge to drink. They'd been absent during Lydia's reign, scared away by the constant activity and noise. Now they were returning, trusting again. "What's next?" Walter asked. "I don't know, maybe just peace fishing, camping, letting families enjoy the lake." "Boring," Walter said with a grin. "Boring sounds perfect." But even as he said it, Evan's phone buzzed with an email. The return address made his blood run cold. Federal Bureau of Prisons. The message was simple. "Mr. Harper, I wanted you to know that I've found religion in here. I've been born again and I forgive you for everything. I hope you can forgive me too. I'll be eligible for early release in 7 years with good behavior. Perhaps we can start fresh then. Lydia." Walter read it over his shoulder. "She's playing a new game. Let her play. She's in federal prison. For now. But people like her don't give up. They just change tactics." Evan deleted the email without responding. Lydia could plan all she wanted from her cell. He had a lake to tend, a community to be part of, a life to live. But Walter was right. People like Lydia didn't give up. They waited, planned, looked for weakness. The war might be won, but vigilance would always be necessary. 7 years passed like a slow-healing wound. The lake thrived, becoming the community gathering place Evan's grandfather had always envisioned. Children learned to swim in its waters. Families picnicked on its shores, and old-timers fished from the dock Evan had rebuilt with lumber from the original. Evan had married Sophia 3 years after the trial. Their wedding was held at the lake, with Walter officiating through an online ministry license he'd obtained specifically for the occasion. Clara Hayes made the cake, Harold Vance gave a toast about redemption, and even Luke Carver attended in his state police dress uniform. They'd built a modest house on the ranch property, close enough to watch over the lake, but far enough to have privacy. Sophia's book about the HOA battle had spawned a documentary series and speaking tours. She'd become a nationally recognized advocate for property rights and HOA reform. Life had found a rhythm of peace that Evan had never thought possible during those dark days of Lydia's reign. He worked part-time at the logistics company, spent weekends teaching kids to fish, and thought less and less about the woman in federal prison. Then the letter arrived. It came on a Tuesday morning, delivered by certified mail requiring signature. The return address was the Federal Bureau of Prisons, but this time it wasn't from Lydia. It was from the parole board. Miss Lydia Warwick has been approved for early release based on good behavior, completion of rehabilitation programs, and demonstrated remorse for her crimes. As a victim in this case, you have the right to submit a statement regarding her release. Evan's hands shook as he read the letter. 7 years. She'd served only 7 years of a 25-year sentence. Sophia found him sitting at the kitchen table, the letter spread before him. She read it silently, then sat down hard. How is this possible? She was supposed to serve at least 15. Overcrowding, good behavior, prison reform initiatives. Plus, she apparently became a model prisoner, taught literacy classes, led a prayer group, mentored younger inmates. It's an act. It has to be. Maybe. Or maybe prison actually changed her. Even as he said it, Evan didn't believe it. Lydia Warwick didn't change, she adapted. Walter arrived within an hour of Evan's call, followed by Clara and Harold. They gathered around the kitchen table like a war council reconvening after years of peace. I've been tracking her through contacts, Harold said, pulling out a tablet. She's been busy in prison, getting a paralegal certification, studying real estate law, corresponding with lawyers about wrongful conviction claims. She's planning something, Clara said. Lydia never does anything without a plan. But what can she do? Sophia asked. She's a convicted felon. She can't run an HOA, can't hold a real estate license, can't even vote. She can't do those things directly, Walter corrected. But she can work through proxies, consultants, advisors. I've seen it before with white-collar criminals. They find ways around the restrictions. Evan's phone rang. Detective Martinez, now Captain Martinez. I assume you got the letter, she said without preamble. How did this happen? Politics. Prison reform is popular, and Lydia played the system perfectly. Model prisoner religious conversion letters of support from prison chaplains and even some guards. Her lawyer argued she was a nonviolent offender who posed no threat to society. No threat. She destroyed dozens of families. I know, I objected, but the parole board voted 2 for release. She'll be on supervised probation for 5 years, can't leave the state, has to maintain employment, and can't have contact with victims, including me. Especially you. She comes within 500 feet, she goes back to prison. After the call, they spent hours debating whether to submit victim impact statements. Clara and Harold wanted to fight the release, but Evan wondered if it would make any difference. The decision's already made, he said. Fighting it might just show her she still has power over us. Or it shows we're still watching, Walter countered, that we won't let her slip back into the shadows. That night, Evan walked alone to the lake. The moon was full, casting silver ripples across the water. A family of owls hooted from the pine trees, and somewhere in the distance, coyotes sang to the stars. This place had healed from Lydia's poison, but could it survive her return? His phone buzzed. An unknown number, but the message made his blood run cold. I hear congratulations are in order. Your wife's pregnancy is wonderful news. Children are such a blessing. See you soon. A friend. Evan ran back to the house. Sophia was in the living room working on her laptop. Did you tell anyone? He asked urgently. Tell anyone what? About the pregnancy. Did you post anything online? No. We agreed to wait until the second trimester. Only the doctor knows, and your mother. Sophia's face paled. Why? He showed her the message. She grabbed her laptop, immediately checking their security cameras, their social media, everything. How could she know she's still in prison? She has people on the outside. She's always had people. They spent the night implementing new security measures. Cameras with facial recognition, motion sensors, even a panic button connected directly to the state police. Walter brought over 2 of his German shepherds, trained guard dogs he'd been keeping. They'll alert you to anyone approaching, he said, and they don't take bribes. 3 weeks later, Lydia Warwick walked out of federal prison. The news showed her emerging in a modest gray suit, her hair now completely white, looking frail and grandmother-like. She gave no statement, simply got into a waiting car and disappeared. She looks different, Sophia said, watching the footage. She looks harmless, Evan corrected. That's more dangerous. Within days, reports started coming in. Lydia had taken a job at a nonprofit focused on prisoner rehabilitation. She was living in a halfway house, attending church, volunteering at a food bank. The perfect image of a reformed criminal. But Evan knew better. The nonprofit she worked for had recently started a program advising homeowners associations on ethical governance. The church she attended was attended by 3 judges and 2 county commissioners. The food bank served several neighborhoods where she'd previously operated. She was rebuilding her network. A month after her release, the problem started. First, it was small things. The road to Evan's ranch was suddenly scheduled for emergency maintenance that never seemed to happen but blocked access for weeks. The county assessor decided the ranch needed a routine reevaluation that could potentially triple the property taxes. Then came the environmental group claiming the lake was a critical habitat that should be closed to public use. The group was new formed just weeks after Lydia's release, funded by anonymous donors. "She can't contact us directly," Walter said during one of their strategy meetings, "but she can make our lives hell indirectly." "We beat her before," Clara said, though she sounded less confident than she had 7 years ago. At 82, the fight had taken a toll on her. "We had evidence of crimes before," Harold pointed out. "Now she's being careful, nothing directly traceable to her." The stress was affecting everyone. Sophia was having trouble sleeping, worried about the baby. Evan found himself constantly checking cameras, jumping at shadows. The peace they'd built was crumbling under the weight of paranoia. Then Marcus appeared. Marcus Cole was 28, handsome, charming, and had just moved to Pine Hollow. He bought the old Mitchell place, paying cash, and immediately began ingratiating himself with the community. He hosted barbecues, volunteered for everything, and within 2 months was being encouraged to run for the newly formed community board. "He's too perfect," Sophia said, after meeting him at a community event. "Nobody's that nice without an agenda." Evan did some digging. Marcus Cole had no internet presence before 6 months ago. His background was vague: entrepreneur and investor, with no specific companies named. His references all led to disconnected numbers or businesses that had recently closed. "He's a plant," Walter said flatly. "Lydia's proxy." "Can we prove it?" "Not yet, but watch, he'll start pushing for more organization in the community. HOA 2.0. Walter was right. Within weeks, Marcus was suggesting the community needed structure to maintain property values. He proposed voluntary guidelines that sounded reasonable but contained language eerily similar to Lydia's old HOA rules. At a community meeting, Evan confronted him directly. "Who are you really, Marcus?" "Just a concerned neighbor who wants our community to thrive," Marcus replied smoothly. "I understand you've had bad experiences with governance before, but not all organization is evil, Mr. Harper. When it threatens people's property rights, it is. Who's threatening anyone? I'm simply suggesting voluntary cooperation." The room was divided. Newer residents who didn't remember Lydia's reign were swayed by Marcus's charm and apparent reasonableness. Older residents were suspicious but afraid to speak up, not wanting to seem paranoid. After the meeting, Evan followed Marcus to his car. "I know who sent you." Marcus smiled. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Tell Lydia it won't work. We won't let her take control again." "Mr. Harper, I think you're letting past trauma cloud your judgment. Miss Warwick is a reformed woman focused on rehabilitation and redemption. She has nothing to do with my interest in community improvement. Stay away from my family." "Is that a threat?" Marcus pulled out his phone, ostensibly recording. "Are you threatening me, Mr. Harper?" Evan walked away, knowing he'd been baited. Within hours, Marcus had filed a complaint with the sheriff's office about Evan's harassment and threatening behavior. The sheriff, a different one from 7 years ago, but equally political, called Evan in for questioning. The interview was cordial, but the message was clear: back off or face charges. Meanwhile, the environmental group escalated their campaign against the lake. They filed lawsuits claiming Evan was violating the conservation easement by allowing public access. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The very document that had protected the lake from Lydia was now being weaponized by her proxies. The legal fees started mounting. Even with Sophia's book royalties, the constant battles were draining their resources. Clara's health was declining under the stress. Harold was talking about leaving town. "She's winning without even showing her face," Sophia said one night, her hand protectively over her growing belly. "Maybe we should just leave. Start over somewhere else." "That's what she wants," Evan replied, though he was tempted by the idea. "If we run, she wins, and then she'll do this to other families." The turning point came when their daughter was born. Emma Harper entered the world on a stormy October night, perfect and precious, and suddenly making everything else seem both more and less important. As Evan held his daughter for the first time, He thought about his grandfather, about the legacy of the land, about what really mattered. The lake was important, but family was everything. 2 days later, while Sophia and Emma were still in the hospital, Evan returned home to find his front door open. Nothing was stolen. Nothing overtly disturbed, but a single photo had been left on Emma's nursery changing table, a picture of the lake with a red X drawn across it. The message was clear: your child or your land. Evan called Captain Martinez immediately. This is witness intimidation, harassment, breaking and entering. What proof do you have it was Lydia? The photo could have been from anyone. No fingerprints, no cameras caught anything, no witnesses. You know it was her. Knowing and proving are different things. She's been at work all day, dozens of witnesses. Marcus Cole was leading a community cleanup. Everyone has alibis. That night, Evan made a decision that would have been unthinkable years ago. He called Marcus. I want to meet with Lydia, he said. I don't know what you're... Cut the act. I know you're her proxy. Tell her I'll meet her at the lake tomorrow at dawn. Neutral ground. Mr. Harper, Miss Warwick can't have contact with you. It would violate her parole. Then I guess she'll have to decide what's more important, her freedom or her revenge. The next morning, Evan waited at the lake as the sun painted the sky pink and gold. He wasn't surprised when Marcus arrived instead of Lydia. She wanted me to give you a message, Marcus said. She's willing to end all of this. The lawsuits, the harassment, everything. All you have to do is sell the lake to a trust she has no official connection to. Fair market value. You can keep the ranch, raise your family in peace. And if I refuse, then the pressure continues. Environmental lawsuits, tax reassessments, constant legal battles. Your daughter will grow up with a father consumed by fighting instead of living. Marcus's smile was cold. She can play this game for years. Can you... Evan looked out over the lake, remembering all the battles fought for this piece of water and land. Then he thought about Emma, about the life he wanted to give her. Tell Lydia this, he said finally. I'll make her a different deal. She stops everything, all of it, and I won't expose what I'm about to find. What are you talking about? She made one mistake. She always makes one mistake because she can't help herself. She has to be in control. Evan pulled out his phone, showing Marcus a video. This is from 3 nights ago. Lydia entering my property, placing that photo. She thought she avoided the cameras, but I installed wildlife cams in the trees last month. Infrared motion activated, uploaded directly to the cloud. Marcus's face went pale. That could be anyone. It's her. The way she walks, the way she holds her shoulders. I've had 7 years to study her every move, plus the timestamp corresponds with a gap in her halfway house sign-in log. She snuck out. You're bluffing. Am I one parole violation and she goes back for the full sentence, 18 more years? Is she willing to risk it? Marcus left without another word. That afternoon, all the lawsuits were withdrawn. The environmental group dissolved. The tax reassessment was canceled. But Evan knew it wasn't over. It would never truly be over. Lydia was out there, planning, waiting, looking for another opportunity. The only thing that had changed was the balance of power. She knew he was watching too. A week later, a handwritten letter arrived. No return address. Well played. Your grandfather would be proud. We'll call this a draw. For now, enjoy your family, Mr. Harper. Children grow up so fast. L. Evan burned the letter and installed more cameras. 5 years passed in uneasy peace. Emma grew into a curious, fearless child who loved the lake as much as her great-grandfather had. She learned to swim at 3, caught her first fish at 4, and by 5 was leading nature walks for other kids. Lydia kept her distance, though Evan occasionally spotted her at the edge of the property line, just beyond the 500-foot restriction, watching through binoculars. He documented every instance but didn't report them. They'd reached a détente of mutual surveillance. Marcus Cole left town after a year, replaced by another charming newcomer who tried to organize the community before also departing. Lydia's proxies came and went, but none gained traction. The community had learned to be suspicious of 2 perfect neighbors with organizational ambitions. Clara Hayes passed away peacefully in her sleep at 87, leaving her HOA abuse victims nonprofit to Sophia. Harold Vance remarried and moved to California but stayed in touch. Walter, now 83, still patrolled his property, with his dogs ever vigilant. Captain Martinez retired, warning Evan that Lydia's parole would end soon. When that happens, all restrictions come off. She'll be free to contact you. Come near the property, start another HOA if she can find people stupid enough to follow her. Let her try, Evan said, though the thought chilled him. The final confrontation came on a spring morning when Emma was 6. Evan was teaching her to tie fishing flies when Sophia called from the house, her voice tight with concern. You need to see this. On her laptop was a real estate listing. The old Coleman place right next to their ranch was for sale. The buyer was listed as Pine Valley Development LLC. The company was registered to Marcus Cole, but Evan knew who really controlled it. She's going to be our neighbor, Sophia said quietly. She's 78 years old. How much fight can she have left? But they both knew the answer. Lydia would fight until her last breath and maybe even beyond. She'd spent her prison years planning, her parole years preparing, and now she was making her final move. The sale went through despite Evan's attempts to buy the property himself. He was always outbid by exactly $1, a petty power play typical of Lydia. She moved in on a Sunday, a procession of moving trucks and construction vehicles transforming the Coleman place into a fortress of cameras and fences. That evening, as Evan stood at the property line, Lydia appeared on the other side. It was the first time they'd been face-to-face in 12 years. She looked older, frailer, but her eyes burned with the same cold fire. "Hello, neighbor," she said pleasantly. "Lydia, I'm not here to cause trouble, Mr. Harper. I'm just an old woman who wants to spend her remaining years in a beautiful place." "We both know that's not true." She smiled. "You're right. I want to spend my remaining years watching you look over your shoulder, wondering when I'll strike. Wondering if that new friend of Emma's is really a friend. Wondering if that nice couple who just moved in down the road works for me. Wondering if every setback, every problem, every little thing that goes wrong is my doing. That's no way to live. Neither is what you did to me. 25 years of my life gone. My reputation destroyed, my legacy erased. Your legacy was built on theft and lies. My legacy was bringing order to chaos, making beautiful communities out of neglected properties. You destroyed that. No, you destroyed it with your greed." They stood there, two enemies grown old in their conflict, separated by a property line that might as well have been a battlefield. "I have a granddaughter now," Lydia said suddenly. "Jennifer's daughter. She doesn't know who I really am, of course. Jennifer told her I died years ago. That's probably for the best. Is it everyone deserves a chance at redemption, Mr. Harper? Even me. You had that chance. You used it to plan revenge. No, I used it to plan justice. There's a difference." Before Evan could respond, Emma came running up, her fishing rod in hand. "Daddy, I caught a bluegill. It's huge." She stopped when she saw Lydia tilting her head curiously. "Hello, are you our new neighbor?" "I am," Lydia said, her voice softening. "You must be Emma. I've heard you're quite the fisher." "I am. My daddy taught me. He says my great-grandpa was the best fisherman ever." "I'm sure he was," Lydia said, something unreadable passing across her face. "Enjoy it while you can, dear." As Emma ran back to the lake, Lydia turned to Evan one last time. "She's lovely. You're lucky. Family is everything, isn't it? Worth protecting at any cost." The threat was subtle but clear. Evan's jaw clenched. "If you come near my daughter, I won't have to. The world is full of dangers, Mr. Harper. Accidents happen. Children trust too easily. Parents can't watch every moment." She smiled coldly. "But, don't worry. I'm just an old woman enjoying her retirement. What could I possibly do?" She walked away, leaving Evan with the terrible certainty that the war wasn't over. It had just entered its most dangerous phase. That night, Evan called a family meeting. Walter, Sophia, even Luke Carver, who drove down from the state capitol. "We need to end this," Evan said. "Once and for all." "How?" Sophia asked. "She hasn't committed any crimes. She's just existing, menacingly." "Then we need to make her commit a crime," Walter said. "Give her enough rope to hang herself." "That's entrapment," Luke warned. "No, it's strategy," Walter countered. "She's planning something. We just need to figure out what and get ahead of it." They spent weeks investigating, watching, waiting. Slowly, a pattern emerged. Lydia was meeting with developers, environmental lawyers, county officials. She was building something, but what? The answer came from an unexpected source. Jennifer Lydia's estranged daughter reached out to Sophia through the nonprofit. "My mother is dying," she said over video call. "Pancreatic cancer stage 4. She has maybe 6 months." The news should have brought relief, but instead it brought dread. A dying Lydia with nothing to lose was infinitely more dangerous than a healthy one planning for the future. "She's liquidating everything," Jennifer continued. "Selling assets, moving money. She says it's for medical treatment, but I know my mother. She's planning something, some final victory." "Do you know what?" "No, but she's been obsessed with something called perpetual conservation. She has lawyers researching it constantly." Evan's blood ran cold. Perpetual conservation was a legal mechanism where land could be locked into conservation status forever, preventing any development or use changes. If Lydia could somehow force the lake into that status with herself or her proxies as trustees, she could control it from beyond the grave. "We need those documents," Evan said. "I can't get them. She doesn't trust me, but—" Jennifer hesitated. "There's someone she does trust, Marcus Cole. He visits her every day." "Marcus works for her." "No, it's more than that. They're involved, romantically." The revelation was shocking, but made sense. Marcus was 40 years younger than Lydia, but if she was dying and had millions in assets, he had every reason to stay close. "Would Marcus betray her for the right price?" Walter asked bluntly. "He might not have to," Jennifer said. "My mother is paranoid but also vain. She records everything thinking she'll write a memoir someday. Marcus has access to those recordings." The plan they hatched was dangerous but necessary. Jennifer would reach out to Marcus, suggesting she wanted to reconcile with her mother before it was too late. During the visit, she'd plant a listening device Sophia had obtained through her journalism contacts. It worked better than they'd hoped. Within days, they had recordings of Lydia outlining her final plan. She was going to claim the lake was contaminated again this time, with radiation from natural deposits. Her environmental contacts would discover it, forcing an emergency state seizure. Then her trust run by Marcus would offer to manage the cleanup and conservation, effectively taking control forever. "It's brilliant," Walter admitted grudgingly. "Even if we exposed it, the contamination would be real. She's actually going to irradiate the lake. She'll poison it forever just to win." Sophia was horrified. "She's dying," Evan said quietly. "She wants to ensure I lose even after she's gone." They had the evidence, but stopping her would require perfect timing. Too early and she'd adjust her plan. Too late and the lake would be destroyed. The night Lydia planned to execute her scheme, they were ready. State police, federal environmental agents, even a hazmat team waited in the woods. Evan watched through night vision goggles as Marcus and 2 others approached the lake with lead-lined containers. But Lydia herself was there too, despite her illness, directing the operation from a wheelchair. Even dying, she needed to be in control. "Now," Captain Martinez ordered. The arrests were swift and efficient. Marcus surrendered immediately, but Lydia remained calm, almost serene. "You can arrest me," she told Martinez, "but I'm dying anyway. What can you really do to me?" "We can ensure you die in prison," Martinez replied. "And that your legacy is forever tainted as someone who would poison children's swimming water out of spite." For the first time in all their conflicts, Evan saw real emotion crack Lydia's facade. I'm not a monster. I just wanted justice." "You wanted revenge," Evan said, stepping forward, "and you were willing to destroy everything to get it." As they led her away, Lydia looked back one last time. "Your grandfather would have understood," she said quietly. "He knew what it was like to fight for something, to never give up." "He also knew when to let go," Evan replied. "Something you never learned." Lydia died 6 weeks later in the prison hospital. Her final scheme thwarted, her legacy destroyed. Marcus Cole testified against her in exchange for a reduced sentence. The radioactive materials were safely disposed of the lake, protected by even stronger federal oversight. At her funeral, only Jennifer attended, finally free from her mother's shadow. She found Evan at the lake afterward. "I'm sorry," she said simply, "for everything she put you through." "It's not your fault." "No, but it's my burden. She was my mother despite everything." Jennifer looked out over the water. "She told me once that this lake was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. That's why she wanted it so badly. She couldn't stand that something so perfect belonged to someone else. "It doesn't belong to me," Evan said. "It belongs to everyone." That's what she never understood. Years later, when Emma was 18 and heading to college to study environmental law, she asked her father about the old woman who'd lived next door when she was little. "She was complicated," Evan said carefully. "Brilliant, determined, but ultimately consumed by her need to control everything around her." "Were you enemies?" Evan thought about it. "We were opponents, but in a strange way she made me stronger. Fighting her taught me what was worth protecting and what battles were worth fighting." "Would you do it all again?" He looked at his daughter, strong and confident, raised on the shores of a free lake surrounded by a true community. Every single time. The lake sparkled in the afternoon sun, peaceful and pristine. Children splashed in the shallows while their parents watched from the shore. Old-timers fished from the dock, telling stories of the great HOA war that had saved their community. Walter, now 90, but still sharp, sat in his usual spot with his fishing rod. "Your grandpa would be proud," he told Evan. "You didn't just save the lake, you saved the soul of this place." That evening, as 3 generations of Harpers gathered for dinner at the ranch, Evan raised a toast. To William Harper, who bought this land with dreams, to Clara Hayes, who kept the records, to Harold Vance, who gathered evidence, to everyone who stood up when it mattered. And to you, Sophia added, who refused to give up. To all of us, Evan corrected, because that's how you beat corruption together. Outside the lake reflected the setting sun like liquid gold, finally and forever free. Somewhere, perhaps Lydia Warrick's spirit watched, still plotting, still planning. But it didn't matter anymore. The community had learned to spot tyrants, to question authority, to stand together against those who would abuse power. The Harper Lake would remain open to all, a testament to the principle that some things shouldn't be owned by the few, but shared by the many. Children would learn to swim in its waters, families would gather on its shores, and the story of the HOA war would be told for generations. In the end, that was the true victory. Not just defeating Lydia, but creating something she could never understand, a community built on trust, not control. Freedom, not fear. Love, not power. As the stars emerged over Pine Hollow, Evan stood on his dock one last time, his daughter beside him, his wife's hand in his, surrounded by friends who'd become family. The water lapped gently against the shore, whispering stories of struggle and triumph, of loss and redemption, of a battle fought and won. "What are you thinking about?" Emma asked. "Just remembering," Evan said, "and being grateful. For winning. For having something worth fighting for, and people worth fighting alongside." The lake stretched out before them, dark and peaceful under the stars, holding its secrets and memories. It had survived contamination, legal battles, and the twisted ambitions of a brilliant but corrupted woman. It would survive whatever came next, because that's what the Harper family did. They endured. They protected what mattered, and they never ever gave up. The story of the HOA war would become legend in Pine Hollow, told and retold, each version adding new details but always carrying the same message. Stand up to bullies, protect your community, fight for what's right, and sometimes, just sometimes, David really does beat Goliath. 10 years had passed since Lydia Warrick's death. Emma Harper, now 28 and a successful environmental lawyer, stood in the same courtroom where her father had fought his battles decades earlier. But this time, she wasn't defending, she was prosecuting. The defendant was Preston Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Development Corporation, who'd attempted to use eminent domain to seize 12 family farms, including what remained of the Harper Ranch. His scheme was sophisticated, using shell companies, bribed inspectors, and fabricated environmental violations. It was Lydia's playbook, refined and modernized. "Your Honor," Emma said, her voice carrying her father's determination, "the evidence will show that Mr. Blackwood orchestrated a conspiracy that makes the old HOA corruption look amateur by comparison." Evan watched from the gallery, his hair now more gray than brown, Sophia beside him, with their younger son William, named for his great-grandfather. At 62, Evan had thought his fighting days were over. He was wrong. It had started 6 months earlier when Preston Blackwood arrived in Pine Hollow with a vision of transforming rural decay into suburban prosperity. He bought the old Warwick property, Lydia's final residence, and immediately began acquiring surrounding land through increasingly aggressive means. He's different from Lydia, Walter had warned during their first strategy meeting. The old veteran was 93 now, confined to a wheelchair, but still sharp as a blade. She wanted control. He wants money. That makes him more dangerous because he has no ideology to constrain him. Blackwood had moved fast. Within 3 months, he'd established a new HOA Pine Hollow Estates and somehow gotten 40% of residents to sign up, lured by promises of increased property values and modern amenities. Those who refused found themselves facing code violations, tax liens, and mysterious infrastructure problems. The Harper Ranch's well water was contaminated with industrial solvents that traced back to illegal dumping on Blackwood's property. When Evan complained, inspectors clearly paid off, blamed the contamination on the ranch's inadequate septic system, and fined them $100,000. "It's Lydia all over again," Sophia had said, reviewing the documents. "No," Emma had corrected home for Thanksgiving when the crisis began. "It's worse. Lydia at least pretended to care about the community. This man just wants to build a shopping mall where our lake sits." The lake. Always it came back to the lake. Blackwood's master plan, discovered through a whistleblower in his company, showed a massive commercial development centered on the Harper Lake. Luxury condos, a golf course, a shopping center, all requiring the voluntary relocation of existing residents. The conservation easement still protects it, Evan had reminded them. "He's found a loophole," Emma explained, reviewing the legal documents. "If the land becomes economically non-viable due to contamination or other factors, the state can override the easement for public benefit. He's systematically making our properties worthless on paper while preparing to swoop in." The war that followed was brutal. Blackwood had learned from Lydia's mistakes. He kept his hands legally clean, working through proxies and subsidiaries. When residents complained, they found themselves sued for defamation. When they organized resistance, their employers received anonymous tips about problematic employees. Harold Vance, now 85 and in failing health, had provided crucial intelligence from his nursing home bed. "I've seen this before," he wheezed through his oxygen mask. "Shell companies registered in Delaware, funds routed through the Caymans. Follow the money, it always leads back to the source." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Marcus Cole. Marcus had served 3 years for his part in Lydia's final scheme and emerged a changed man. He'd started a nonprofit helping communities fight predatory development and reached out to Emma when he heard about Blackwood. "I owe your family a debt," he'd said simply. "Let me help repay it." Marcus had connections in Blackwood's organization, people he'd met during his time in white-collar prison. Through them, he obtained recordings of Blackwood explicitly discussing bribes, contamination plans, and his strategy to force out the hillbillies and make real money. But even with evidence, the legal battle was exhausting. Blackwood had a team of 20 lawyers, unlimited funds, and political connections that reached to the state capitol. Every victory was appealed, every injunction challenged, every piece of evidence questioned. The stress was taking its toll. Walter's health declined rapidly, and he passed away in his sleep just 2 weeks before the trial. His last words to Evan being, "Don't let the bastards win." His funeral was attended by hundreds, a testament to a life spent fighting for others. Emma gave the eulogy, promising to finish what Walter had helped start. "He taught us that bullies come in all forms," she said, looking directly at Blackwood, who'd had the audacity to attend. "But they all fall the same way when good people stand together." Now in the courtroom, Emma was making good on that promise. She presented evidence, methodically building a case that was both legally bulletproof and emotionally devastating. Contamination reports, bribery recordings, victim testimony, each piece adding to a portrait of corporate greed run amok. Blackwood's defense attorney the same. Richard Blackstone, who'd defended Lydia years ago, tried his usual tactics. Discredit witnesses, challenge evidence, create reasonable doubt. But Emma had learned from her father's experience. "Mr. Blackstone, she said during one heated exchange you defended Lydia Warwick with these same tactics. She died in prison. Are you really going to try the same playbook?" "Objection," Blackstone said. "Counsel is making inappropriate comparisons." "Sustained," the judge said, but the jury had heard it. The connection was made. The star witness was unexpected Jennifer Warwick Chen, Lydia's daughter. now a respected psychiatrist who'd spent years studying the psychology of corporate predators. Mr. Blackwood exhibits classic signs of antisocial personality disorder with narcissistic features, she testified. He views people as obstacles to profit, communities as resources to exploit. My mother was the same way, and I've spent my life trying to understand and prevent such harm. You're comparing the defendant to your mother, Emma asked. I'm saying they're cut from the same cloth. Different methods, same fundamental disregard for human dignity. Blackwood's expression during her testimony was telling, rage barely contained behind a mask of indifference. The defense's case crumbled when their key witness, a supposed environmental expert who claimed the Harper Lake was naturally contaminated, was exposed as a fraud. Emma revealed he'd lost his license years ago for falsifying data and was being paid $50,000 for his testimony. But the real drama came when Blackwood himself took the stand. Against his lawyer's advice, his ego demanded he tell his side of the story. These people, he said, gesturing dismissively at the gallery full of Pine Hollow residents, are standing in the way of progress. That lake could generate millions in revenue, create hundreds of jobs, transform this backwater into something meaningful. By forcing families from their homes, Emma challenged. By offering them fair market value for properties they're too stubborn to sell. Well, fair market value after you've contaminated their water and destroyed their property values. That's business, Miss Harper. Your family's sentimental attachment to that lake has held back this entire region's development for decades. My family's protection of that lake has preserved something priceless for future generations. Priceless, Blackwood laughed. Everything has a price, even your precious principles. Emma smiled coldly. Would you like to know the price of your principles, Mr. Blackwood? She pulled up a document on the courtroom screen. This is your personal email to your CFO dated 3 months ago. Would you read the highlighted portion? Blackwood's face went pale as he read. If the Harper girl becomes too much of a problem, we have options. Car accidents happen. Single women living alone are vulnerable. Make sure our security contractor understands the stakes. The courtroom erupted. The judge had to bang his gavel repeatedly to restore order. You threatened to have me killed, Emma asked calmly. That's taken out of context. What context makes threatening murder acceptable, Mr. Blackwood? His lawyers were frantically trying to object, but the damage was done. Emma had saved the email for this moment, knowing it would destroy any jury sympathy he might have had. The verdict was swift and decisive, guilty on all counts. Racketeering, conspiracy, environmental crimes, witness intimidation. The list went on. The judge's sentence was even harsher than Lydia's had been, 40 years without parole. As marshals led Blackwood away, he turned to Evan. This isn't over. I have partners, investors. They won't let this stand. Let them come, Evan replied. We've been doing this for a while now, but the threat wasn't empty. Within weeks of Blackwood's conviction, new players emerged. International development conglomerates, foreign investors, even government officials talking about optimizing land use for economic growth. The Harper family realized they weren't just fighting individuals anymore. They were fighting a system that saw their land as an underutilized asset, their community as an obstacle to profit. Emma took leave from her law firm to establish the Harper Foundation, dedicated to protecting family lands from predatory development. Using the proceeds from Sophia's books and documentary rights, they created a legal defense fund for families facing similar threats. We can't fight every battle ourselves, Emma explained to the Foundation's first meeting, but we can give others the tools to fight their own. The Foundation's first major case came quickly. The state legislature was considering a bill that would weaken conservation easements, obviously backed by development lobbies. Emma organized a coalition of family farms, environmental groups, and surprisingly, some ethical developers who understood the value of preservation. The hearing was packed. Emma testified alongside farmers, teachers, children who'd learned to swim in protected lakes. But the most powerful testimony came from an unexpected source. Marcus Cole, now fully reformed and working as an advocate, brought with him a dozen former corporate raiders who'd found conscience. They testified about the tactics used to steal family lands, the psychological manipulation, the financial warfare. I was one of them, Marcus admitted to the legislature. I help destroy communities for profit. I'm here to tell you that once you let these protections fall, you can never get them back. The land becomes commodity community, becomes product, and heritage becomes history. The bill was defeated, but everyone knew it would return in different forms. The fight for the land was eternal, each generation facing new threats with new tactics. One evening, as 3 generations of Harpers gathered at the lake for Emma's daughter's first birthday, she'd married her law school sweetheart and started her own family. Evan reflected on the long war they'd been fighting. "Do you regret it?" Sophia asked, watching their granddaughter splash in the shallows. "All the battles, all the stress." "No," Evan said without hesitation. "Every fight taught us something. Every victory protected something precious." Young William, now 18 and headed to study environmental engineering, joined them. "Dad, Emma told me about the foundation getting death threats. Are we safe?" "We're never completely safe," Evan admitted. "There will always be someone who sees what we protect as something to exploit, but we're strong. We have each other, we have the community, and we have the law when it works. And when it doesn't work, then we make it work. We expose corruption, we rally support, we never give up." Evan looked at his son seriously. "That's the Harper legacy, not just the land, but the willingness to defend it." That night, as the family celebrated by the lake, Emma received a call. Another community was under attack, this time in Montana. A mining company was claiming mineral rights superseded surface ownership, threatening to destroy a dozen family ranches. "We'll help," Emma said without hesitation. "Send me the documents." After she hung up, her husband asked, "Don't you ever get tired of fighting?" "Yes," Emma admitted. "But then I think about what happens if we stop. Every protected acre that falls to development, every family farm that becomes a shopping mall, every pristine lake that gets drained for a golf course, that's a piece of our soul we never get back." Her daughter toddled over Sandy and giggling, reaching up to be held. Emma picked her up, looking out over the lake that had been in their family for nearly a century. "What will you tell her when she's older?" her husband asked. "About all this fighting?" "I'll tell her what my father told me, what his grandfather told him. That some things are worth fighting for no matter how hard it gets. That standing up to bullies is always right, even when you're outnumbered. And that the land remembers those who protect it." As if in response, a great blue heron landed on the dock, fishing in the evening light, just as they had for generations. The lake was calm, reflecting the first stars of evening, holding its secrets and stories. The next morning brought new challenges. A tech billionaire had bought property upstream and was planning to dam the creek that fed the lake. A pharmaceutical company was lobbying to weaken water quality standards. The state was considering a new highway that would cut through the conservation easement. But also that morning, Emma received dozens of emails from communities across the country. Families who'd successfully fought off developers using the Harper Foundation's resources. Children sending pictures of lakes and streams they'd helped protect. Veterans of the land wars sharing strategies and support. "We're not alone anymore," Emma told her father, showing him the messages. "We've built an army." "Your great-grandfather would be amazed," Evan said. "He just wanted to protect one lake. Now we're protecting hundreds." "Thousands," Emma corrected. "The foundation has helped file over 3,000 conservation easements in the last 2 years, each one a fortress against development. But even fortresses could fall." They learned this when news came that Harold Vance had passed away, leaving behind a final gift, his entire estate, to the Harper Foundation, along with boxes of documents he'd collected over decades. He never stopped investigating, his lawyer explained, delivering the boxes. Even in the nursing home, he was tracking shell companies documenting corruption. He said the Harpers would know what to do with it. The documents were a goldmine, revealing a network of corruption that spanned the entire country. Development companies, government officials, even judges, all connected in a web of mutual benefit at the expense of family lands. "This is bigger than we thought," Emma said, reviewing the files with a team of volunteer lawyers. "It's not just random attacks. It's coordinated, systematic. They're trying to corporatize all of rural America." "Then we stop them," Evan said simply. "Dad, this is beyond us. This needs federal investigation, congressional hearings. Then we make that happen. We've done impossible things before." The campaign that followed was the largest the Harper Foundation had ever undertaken. Emma testified before Congress, showing evidence of interstate corruption and racketeering. Sophia's documentary about the land wars won an Academy Award, bringing national attention to the issue. William, fresh from college, designed water testing systems that could detect contamination in real time, making it harder for companies to poison properties. The federal investigation that resulted led to hundreds of arrests, new laws protecting family lands, and a Supreme Court decision strengthening conservation easements. It was a victory that would protect millions of acres for generations. But victories in the land wars were never permanent. At the celebration party by the lake, Emma noticed her father standing apart, looking worried. "What's wrong? We won." "We won this round," Evan corrected. "But look." He pointed to the horizon where new construction was visible. "They're building just outside our protected zone, waiting. They'll always be waiting." "Then we'll always be watching," Emma said firmly. "That's what we do." As the party continued, 4 generations of Harpers and their extended family of fellow fighters gathered by the water. Children who'd learned to swim here, now teaching their own children. Veterans of HOA wars sharing stories with young activists. The lake had become more than just water and land. It was a symbol of resistance of the power of ordinary people to stand against corporate greed. That night, after everyone had gone home, Evan sat alone on the dock his grandfather had built. The moon was full, casting silver light across the water. Somewhere, an owl called. Somewhere else, lawyers were planning new attacks on protection laws. The war never ended, but neither did the resistance. Emma joined him, carrying her sleeping daughter. "I've been thinking about Lydia," she said quietly. "In a strange way, we owe her something." "How so?" "She taught us to fight. Without her, we might have lost the lake to the first developer who came along. Because of her, we learned to recognize threats, build defenses, create alliances. We became warriors because we had to fight a war." That's a generous interpretation. Maybe, but I prefer to think that even our enemies can teach us something valuable. A fish jumped in the lake, ripples spreading outward in perfect circles. 4 generations of Harpers had sat on this dock, each facing their own battles, each protecting what mattered. "What do you think the next threat will be?" Emma asked. "I don't know. Climate change making the land more valuable as water becomes scarce. Technology companies wanting to build data centers. Government seizure for infrastructure. The threats evolve, but they never stop." "Neither do we." They sat in comfortable silence, grandfather and granddaughter guardian, and air holding the line together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles, new enemies. But tonight the lake was peaceful, the land was protected, and the Harper legacy continued. The final entry in Evan's journal, found years later, read, "The lake endures." Through contamination and cleanup, through lawsuits and victories, through generations of guardians, it remembers William Harper, who saved for 20 years to buy it. It remembers me, who fought HOAs and corporations to keep it. It will remember Emma and her children, who will face threats I can't imagine. But the lake also remembers Lydia Warwick, Preston Blackwood, and all who tried to steal it. Not with hatred, but as a warning. There will always be those who see beauty and want to own it, who see community and want to control it, who see heritage and want to monetize it. That's why we guard the lake. Not just the water and land, but the idea it represents that some things belong to everyone and no one. That community matters more than profit. That fighting bullies is always worth it no matter the cost. The Harper Lake is free today. It will be free tomorrow if we remain vigilant. And someday, when my great-great-grandchildren sit on this dock, they'll know that freedom isn't inherited, it's earned, defended, and passed on through endless small battles that add up to victory. The war never ends, but neither does hope.